All right, so nice to see you all. And Bezrat Hashem, we should all have a beautiful day and a beautiful tefillah. In this week's parasha, Parashat Korach, that we're about to read, we know the famous story that Korach and 250 other individuals went against Moshe Rabbeinu, and they had a few claims, of course, unjustified and unright, but basically in the deeper essence of their conflict with Moshe Rabbeinu was actually a conflict with Hashem and with the Torah. Because what they said was that if Moshe, they claim to be that he's not a leader, that means that he was self-appointed, and that means that everything that then he would otherwise also have said is not from Hashem, not derived from a godly fashion, rather from a self-driven interest. And so basically they were disclaiming the entire Torah. And later on, as we know in the parasha, we'll see that Moshe has put up a test to see who's right, either Korach and his team or Moshe and the emet, the truth of the Torah. And the ground opened up, they fell into the ground, and other people were crying and running around frantically. Korach and all his people and their tents fell into the ground, and the people that are around them, Nasulo Kolam, they were running around in frantic. And basically they heard Korach and his people saying, Moshe emet, v'torato emet. So the argument was that they first initially went against Moshe Rabbeinu, but when they saw the truth, they said Moshe emet, v'torato emet. And we sing that in hymns in Simchat Torah. It's a very famous thing. Says Rabbi Soloveitchik, the idea of Moshe emet, v'torato emet actually shows us what the problem inherently was with Korach and his people. They were saying as follows: this judgment is still valid. Common sense can only spread confusion and havoc when applied to halakha. Again, common sense can only spread confusion when applied to halakha, as it does with all specialized disciplines. When people talk of meaningful halakha or unfreezing the halakha, or of an empirical halakha, they are basically proposing Korach's approach. Lacking a knowledge of halachic methodology, which can only be achieved through extensive study, they instead apply common sense reasoning, which is replete with platitudes and cliches. Meaning to say, there's this idea of the Torah, that the Torah is godly, the Torah is heavenly, the Torah is divine. We study Torah, and just a little excerpt from the explanation on the Shulchan Aruch that's really explaining from the Ramban, from the Gemara, takes days, if not weeks, to really know the emet. So there is an empirical, there is a study, but the study has to be a godly study. And so when you come to Moshe and you aggressively fight the idea and you say, we want to remove the godly effect, we want to remove the divinity from the Torah, and it's only about empirical or scientific approaches, then that really takes away the whole story of the Torah. And that was their fight against Moshe, their claim against Moshe. And when they saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu came and showed them the emet of truth, the emet of the Torah, and they said, Moshe emet, v'torato emet, the Torah of Moshe is emet. The Torah of Moshe means the Torah of Hashem, that it is godly. And it's not a fight in a battlefield with scientific values. Rather, it's seeing the emet of Hashem. And so that is a very strong lesson for us today as well. Speaking of halakha, the Ben Ish Chai in Parashat Korach speaks about the halachot of zimun, and that's when 3 or more people eat together. When they eat together, situated together, and they agree to eat together in one area, they are obligated to recite zimun. Once they eat together, they cannot separate without zimun. So if 3 people eat together, 3 people eating bread, or at least 2 people eating bread and another person eating mezonot or something else, they have to do zimun. They cannot unbreak the pack because there's an obligation on them to do zimun. So now, what happens though if you have somebody that needs to leave before the other 2? So really, they're obligated to wait for them until they finish eating, and then they do zimun. But they can't tell them, guys, do you mind answering zimun for me? We'll do zimun, I'll do birkat hamazon, you stay here, it's fine. But as long as we did zimun, that's fine. The question is, what about women? Do they also need to do zimun? If they're sitting on their own, they have their own little setting of a meal, do women also have the obligation to do zimun? Says the Ben Ishchai, Nashim afagav den menzamnim alein chole alma, mikol makom יש אומרים דחייבות לזמן מעצמן ויש אומרים שרסות ימצאו מזמנות לעצמן. So says the Ben Ishchai, there's a dispute whether or not women are obligated in zimun and their own meal, but some say that they do have to, and therefore they may do zimun from themselves. So it is a good הנהגה, says the Ben Ishchai, הנה כי כן ראוי שכל אדם ילמד לנשי בני ביתו שיהיו מזמנות לעצמם כשהם אוכלים בשלושה ולא יזמנו בשם אפילו ימיה. So they should do zimun for their own. Now if you have 10 people doing zimun, you have Elokeinu, 7 that ate bread and the other they do Elokeinu. They also cannot break. If you have 10, you can't leave them and then there are 9 and then they don't say Elokeinu. But if you have 20, then you have 2 groups of 10, you could break. Right? And so the idea is not to break the Kedusha, to keep the consistency of the Kedusha. We'll end off with that. Amen. Amen. Welcome back to our good friend Steve from Eretz Yisrael.